You set us afire like the sky, and your spirit is one with me. Your wings span the mighty ocean. Your eyes see everything. The slightest of your motions can make the continents ring. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the sky, leaving just another story amidst millions of man-made lives. They tell us how you fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas, surviving the solar storms, here with Ron Ewart from National Association of Rural Landowners. Ron, I got the feeling I got your mispronounced your last name.
It happens often, Clay. It's pronounced Ewart.
Ewart.
I'm not sure why, but that,
Ewart. All right. Well, I appreciate you correcting me on that.
No problem. It's almost a daily occurrence.
Now, I got in contact. You've been on my show before. Tell me a little bit about the Rural Landowner Association. You know, in my opinion, Richard Kelly Hoskins just really nailed it in his books when he said the foundation of every civilization is the self-sufficient family farm.
You got it. A lot of us wouldn't be eating if it wasn't for farming. In any event, we got our start probably back in 2004 when our local county decided that it was going to pass some kind of draconian environmental ordinance. They said they were doing it in compliance with the Washington State Growth Management Act, and I guess they were. But we got somewhere around 200-300 rural landowners to come in and give testimony. I gave testimony at least 10-12 times. I gave written testimony, and they went ahead and passed the dumb thing anyhow. What happened is we decided to kind of check around the country to see what was going on. Turns out these kinds of ordinances were happening in almost every single county in America, and it's all being pushed by Agenda 21 from the United Nations and from the American Planning Association, who has adopted Agenda 21 in all of their policy manuals, and it's being pushed by the government. The government tried to shove it down our throats through actual legislation. They couldn't do that, so President Clinton signed an executive order to create a council on sustainable development, and little by little they just shoved Agenda 21, which is the antithesis of American freedom and property ownership. We found out this was going on all over the place, and that most rural landowners were almost totally disenfranchised from the political process because all the votes were in the cities, and the cities were essentially brainwashed by all this environmental stuff. And so we decided that we would be an advocate for the rural landowner on a national level. That's what we've done. Well, you got an angry, ferocious beast there.
Hold on to that door. No, just got a neighbor dropping by. So, this Agenda 21. Now, this is for the last 25 years since I've been publishing the Free American and doing this radio show. I've been talking about the plan for global government of the bankers, by the bankers, and for the bankers, and this has all been implemented in through the UN after the League of Nations. The first attempt at world government failed, and this whole Agenda 21. I've said they go after the farmers first, and every time a communist regime takes over a country, they go after the farmers first, the intelligentsia next, the veterans and law enforcement that are still loyal to the old regime, And it feels like that is happening right now. It feels that this whole war on the border is being directed now at the farmers and the ranchers. We've already had several killed.
Yeah, this actually we started out with that framework in mind, that the rural landowner was under an actual assault by their government and the environmental community who was pushing for a lot of this stuff. And that is coming from an international entity of some kind or another, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's the money changers, or whether it's the industrialists or the large corporations. It is still being pushed down the throats of rural landowners. And it might be interesting to note that when Nicolae Ceausescu took over Romania as a communist, the first thing he did was to drive all of the rural landowners, the farmers and ranchers, into town. He confiscated all of their land and then essentially put them into slavery to operate the farms. But he owned everything. The rancher, the independent rancher, farmer, landowner, is a dictator's worst nightmare, because they have open space, they can essentially hide what they're doing, and they are independent. They don't take orders very well. That's probably why I'm doing what I do.
I was just thinking about that this morning. I'm working on another article, and I simply won't be a slave. I'm not getting on my knees to nobody.
That's right. And I've written articles to that effect. I will bow down to no one. It is a slow, insidious, long-term takeover through an ideology, through this idea of social justice. Environmentalism is nothing more than a means to social justice. It is a means to redistribute America's wealth to the rest of the world. That's what cap and trade is. That's what Agenda 21 is. They don't believe in private property ownership, and yet without private property there can't be any other rights. Without property rights there are no other rights. And the whole idea from the international community is that government does a better job and is a better steward of land than people are. And yet we've seen time and time again that is not the case. Their management actually leads to huge forest fires because they don't manage the forest properly. Everything that government touches is mismanaged. Everything that government touches costs 2, 3, 4, and 5 times more than if it was done in private industry. And that's what we're up against. And this is a big fight.
Now, this latest executive order that Obama passed, he's talking about all of the economic viability of rural areas.
It's a smokescreen, Clay.
Yes, sir.
Pure smokescreen. It is another attempt to literally take over and manage all rural land and all the people who inhabit rural land. This is an old strategy of war. Dumb them down, buy them off, make them stupid, and get them to vote for you.
Well, it's interesting that you use that term, because I'm so considered a radical, because I've been telling people we're in a war here, man. This has been going on. What they did to the white Russians, 60 million of them starved to death, killed, they are trying to do to you here.
Well, they haven't gotten to the point of starving us yet. But once government controls the money, the land, the food, the water, the energy, and their health care, they got it all, man. And they can, well, you saw what Stalin did to the Ukraine. They forced them into slave labor to operate the farms, and because they wouldn't capitulate, he literally took the food away from them. Somewhere in the neighborhood of around 10 million people starved to death. And have we reached that point yet? No. Because, one, there's a gun behind every tree, and that's what scares them, and they also are working to see if they can't do something against the Second Amendment. They've been working on the Second Amendment for probably 80 years.
Well, they're also really cranked in. I used to refer to myself as the canary in the coal mine. I said, you know, because I'm outspoken, because I've got a medium, because I've got a platform here, they'll come after me first, and they have certainly done that. But you point out in your article that they're picking us off one by one, that Peggy, Hyatt, Webb, Kilo, Strauss, Miller, Amos, Sackett, Larkin, Parrott, Kirkpatrick, just a few of the names of the tens of thousands of Americans who've had to fight alone against government abuse, arrogance, and irrational and draconian laws passed by out-of-touch lawmakers that don't read the bills they pass or take the time to determine whether those new laws, or even all the old ones, are constitutional. Or they had to fight against government agents working under the color of law with no legal authority, in some cases actually breaking the law. Government special interests know that most Americans won't or can't fight back. They just go their merry way, and if the general population doesn't exist, for the most part it doesn't.
Now, those people that I name are people I either know directly or I know their stories. And that is really the tip of the iceberg.
I know,
there are
and I've been
literally
doing
tens of thousands of people out there who've had to fight alone.
I have been doing these stories on everybody from the Branch Davidians to Randy Weaver to the little old lady up there in Ridge, Illinois, you know, who stood up against
Ruby Ridge is in Idaho. I don't know what you're talking about in
Roby, Illinois, some little old lady, okay. Roby, I believe it was. Some little old lady stood up against the cops that wanted to come and take her to a nursing home, and they surrounded her. At any rate, I went up to speak there. But they're going after. You said they're going after us one by one. Are you talking about patriots? You're talking about the farmers, the ranchers, and they've done that.
And it doesn't even have to be patriots. If you take the story of the Sacketts, which actually made it to the Supreme Court and we're waiting on a decision on it, they were about to build on a lot. They had all the permits and everything in a totally built-out subdivision, and all they did was to fill up the lot to level it so they could put their foundation in. The EPA came down on them. I mean, just something awful, stopped them cold, filed essentially a complaint against them that they had filled in a wetland, that if they didn't do what the EPA wanted, they were going to charge them, I think it was like $37,500 a day. And so the Sacketts got they found just a dead end. They found no recourse against the EPA. It was the EPA's way or the highway. And so they went to the Pacific Legal Foundation. The Pacific Legal Foundation got it to the Supreme Court. The arguments have been essentially given to the Supreme Court. The oral arguments and all the written motions and everything have been given to the Supreme Court. We're waiting on a decision now to literally back the EPA up from this dictatorial power they have. $37,500 a day is an absolute violation of the Eighth Amendment, which precludes cruel and unusual punishment or penalties that don't fit the crime, so to speak. And so that decision, if it comes down in our favor, it will back the EPA up, and at least they will be denuded to some extent. But the EPA is just one of them. In Los Angeles County, the county has created a nuisance abatement team. And essentially what they did is they created a SWAT team with tinted window SUVs, fully armed, bulletproof vests, AK-47s or AR-15s, and they descend on a property owner, and it's a rural one, who maybe hasn't moved quite fast enough to fix a code violation. And they haul them off. And they haul them off to jail, or they haul them off to court. They are literally trying to shove the people out of the Antelope Valley of Los Angeles County by force, by police state. And we're seeing this happen all over the place. That what used to be a civil penalty, which was an environmental or land use code violation, they have now elevated to criminal penalties that require huge penalties and fines and jail time. And this is what's going on, and essentially the whole idea is to intimidate the rural landowners to the point of absolute capitulation. Now, if you if you know rural landowners, they don't capitulate very well. And I expect that if this continues, that somebody's going to get hurt. And when they do, it's going to be a Ruby Ridge or a Waco. They'll put them down so fast, make their head swim. And we're headed for some really tough times if the government, whether it's local, state, or federal, continue this draconian enforcement of law after law after law. They just keep piling up law on top of law on top of law. And I developed real estate about 35 years ago, for about 30 years. And I watched as not only the regulations increased, but the cost to build a house, the cost to develop, to put in roads and utilities, it just kept going higher and higher. And the permit cost kept going higher and higher. What did that do? It added to the cost of the house. There was a study done by a couple of professors that says in certain areas of the country, regulation adds over $200,000 to the value of a house, to the price of a house.
You know, a $3,000 teepee, people lived in those for 10,000 years. If you put a solar unit on the around the top of the thing and a windmill on the top of it, you could actually power the thing, and you wouldn't have to pay for the taxes on a $100,000 home for years. Maybe I scare them with that idea.
Well, a lot of people don't want to live in a small teepee that you're talking about. I don't know whether it's 400 or 500 feet or 200 feet or what it is. Certainly, it's a roof over your head, but it's not big enough to raise a family in or anything like that.
Well, that's probably the only thing I agree with Hillary about. You know, takes a village to raise a child, but this.
I won't go there, Clay.
But the whole basically my concept from Liberty Village is not to replace your 2,000 square foot home, but to give you a place where you can work and live. And a lot of the farmers and ranchers that I've talked to said, man, we can't get any help out here. We can't get any help. The kids don't want to. They want to go to college. They want to go to the city. They don't want to come out on the farm or the ranch and work. But
that's because nobody makes them.
How do we fight this? Now, you say in your article. You say that the courts are corrupt. You know, the only, if you go to court with the county or the city, the only people that make any money are the lawyers that are all members of the same bar association, go to the same club. You know,
it's a closed club too, Clay.
Yes.
I have gone to court twice, once in the U.S. District Court and once in Superior Court. I have fought a multinational corporation on my own. They procedured me out of U.S. District Court, so I took the case to the U.S. or to the Superior Court, and I won in Superior Court. But it's to try and figure out all the rules, and if you make a mistake in any of the rules, you're done. It's all over. And so I brought these guys to their knees, and they said, "What do you want?" And I said, "This is what I want," and they gave it to me, and away we went. But you're absolutely right, and I know other people who have been in the courts, and they frown on anybody who comes into the court that doesn't have a bar number.
In Las Vegas, I went to court. Somebody sued me. I countersued them, and I walked into court, and the lawyer looks over at me and says, "Oh, are you Mr. Douglas's attorney?" I said, "No, I'm Mr. Douglas." "Your Honor, Your Honor, this is the defendant. This is the defendant. Can't you make him hire a lawyer?"
Yeah, right. At $300 an hour?
I told the judge I'd love to hire a lawyer, but I can't find one. I didn't sue these people. They sued me. But if you'll read my countersuit, I think you'll find I'm perfectly capable of defending myself. And he looked at the other lawyer and smiled and said, I can't make him hire a lawyer. And I won, by the way.
Well, that's good. That's good. But see, what has happened is that people have become so comfortable, they don't want to upset their own apple cart. They won't fight back. They think they can't fight back. And so they think all their teeth have been pulled. It turns out that if you will take a little time, I just got an email from somebody, I think it was in regard to this article you talked about, and she said that she has fought government at local, state, or federal levels 174 times, if you can believe that, and she's won every single time. And she says, yeah, it takes a lot of work and study and knowing the rules and everything else, but you can beat these people with their own law, in some cases, not always. But people are so timid, and they think the government is so big, and it's Goliath, and they can't take on Goliath, so they just lay down and roll over.
Well, they are afraid of this. What you're talking about is what they would call a revolution. I don't call it a revolution at all. I think our founding fathers were brilliant men, and they crafted a system of government, a constitutional republic, for the first time in probably, 4,000 years, and we had a form of government run by the people of the country.
Well, they tried it with the Athenians in Greece about 400 or 500 BC, but it didn't last very long. And with the Romans, they lasted for about 400 or 500 years as a republic, and then the Senate abdicated all of their authority and handed it over to Caesar. Then Caesar became a dictator, and the Roman Republic turned into the Roman Empire, and of course the rest is history.
Isn't that exactly what we're seeing happening here? I mean, we are supporting 150 countries with foreign aid. We're giving Americans money to foreign countries if they're a member of this one world global conglomerate of the banksters, by the banksters, and for the banksters.
They're doing, Clay, what the American government is doing to the American public. They're buying them off. They're using our money to make friends or to keep them from doing something that the government doesn't want to do. We've been paying Egypt 1 to 1.5 billion a year to keep them from attacking Russia or Israel. And with the Arab Spring, all the bets are off now, and we're still sending them $1 billion a year. Why in the devil are we sending Egypt $1 billion of American money?
Why are we sending China and Russia and Israel, for God's sakes, billions of dollars to Israel?
Well, I understand, in a way, I understand Israel from a strategic standpoint, because they're sitting there in the middle of this divided Arab world, and we've armed them to the teeth, and so they keep military stability. Believe me, if the Arabs could, they would drive Israel into the sea. The only reason they don't is because Israel has teeth. So from a military strategy standpoint, I can understand that, but the only thing is I haven't the foggiest idea if they're doing it for that reason or not.
Yeah, the reasons are behind this. I mean, we are talking about global government, and it is, and the problems in the United States have all stemmed from the whole Federal Reserve thing. How do we take our money back? I mean, if we were based on a resource-based economy, and our farmers were allowed to grow hemp and grow anything they wanted to here, to sell into town or to sell to their neighbors, wouldn't we have a better system?
Well, I might disagree with you a little bit on that, because look what's happened for many years in Afghanistan. They grow, what is it, poppy for heroin?
Yes, and our troops are guarding them.
It goes into the world market. A lot of it comes here.
Yes.
Probably a lot of it ends up in Europe as well.
Yes.
And so if we allowed them to grow anything, and they grew the highest productive crop, drugs might be the highest productive crop, when we really would like them to kind of make, little food and little animal protein, that sort of thing. But
I don't believe they've stopped growing food in Afghanistan because they're growing poppies, and our troops are guarding it. I mean, to me, the common sense thing to do, because I know in my research and my books that the CIA and the Mossad are behind the drug running. They own the cocaine cartels. They closed down the Median cartel and opened up the Cali cartel of the banksters. And they bring it in right into this country. I mean, I've got statements given to the NSA by colonels in the Special Forces that the cargo was cocaine. So they're bringing it in. Why not just abolish all the laws against victimless crimes that have got more Americans in prison right now, today, than any communist country in the world? And we're still financing all these communist countries from here.
One of the things, I have a close friend of mine, every week we have lunch, and we discuss all of these things. And we come to the conclusion that individually, there is no way we can control these things. We can't get into the CIA and really determine what they're doing. They're a totally clandestine operation. We don't even know how much money they're spending, because it's off the budget. We don't know what the president is doing. We don't know in a lot of cases. I don't know if you saw that thing from Jim DeMint when he was on the floor of the Senate, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, 94% of the legislation coming out of the Senate is done without a vote and without debate. 94%. So we only see 6% of the stuff they're supposedly debating and passing. And I'm trying to figure out, how in the hell do they pass 94% of the laws without anybody knowing about it? Well, DeMint says he'll be on an airplane or getting on an airplane, he'll get a call from some secretary from the Congress and the Senate and say, hey, we're voting on this, we need your vote, up or down. And it's all done clandestine. Well, if 94% of the laws are being passed in the Senate that nobody knows anything about, or without a vote or whatever. In my opinion,
right now, the members of Congress are the ones that passed that NDAA laws, the ones that passed the Patriot Act, the ones that are voting for all this, sending all this money overseas and foreign aid to every communist country in the world. They ought to be tried for treason.
It is treason.
But if the FBI and the feds have gone in, and I've watched this happen over the years, they've gone in, they tried to create homegrown terrorists, tried to turn people like me into homegrown terrorists, and created the fusion centers to coordinate information on a potential terrorist with the feds and with the, so it's, in other words, the feds moved into SWAT teams, trained the SWAT teams, and infiltrated all of the law enforcement here, with the possible exception of the sheriffs that are organizing against them.
Yeah, they're even providing them with equipment and these armored cars and all kinds of stuff.
A little bit more than that now, Ron. I mean, I've just been watching the videos. They've got drones. They've got little helicopters that they can send up that can spy on Americans, go into buildings with Americans, and the full-fledged drones, the same ones that they're blowing up the Afghanis in Afghanistan.
This is one of the reasons, Clay, that I have been adamant about trying to solve this thing with peaceful means, because this isn't 1776 where we both had muskets and pistols and horses and cannons. This is 2012 where we have pistols and rifles and they